many people are getting it wrong. They come on this app, men and women, and they try to explain why it is that young men and boys are suddenly extremely toxic, extremely misogynistic, becoming ultra conservative, or becoming right-wing extremists, and increasing in violence against women and girls, and just generally becoming awful human beings. And their explanation is, well, young men and boys are not getting sex anymore, so this is what society gets. What? First of all, that's wrong. It's the reverse that's true. But second of all, that is extremely dangerous, because what is the solution to that problem? I can tell you what Jordan Peterson says it is. I can tell you what every right-wing, conservative, talking head, misogynistic, patriarchal man thinks is the solution to that problem. And it is coercing or forcing girls and women to have sex, to use their bodies, to make society a better place. That's the solution. So no, I'm sorry. Men are not becoming pieces of shit because women are having sex with them. Women aren't having sex with them because men are becoming pieces of shit. Women can clock misogyny from a mile away, and they don't want it. This is why men are trying to hide it on their dating profiles now. They don't want anything to do with these men. Their ideology makes them unattractive. And no, it is not their height or their lack of a six-figure income or their lack of a six-pack. And no, it's not about their confidence even, or even that they have a job. Those things are nice, but I tell you what, even homeless men can get girlfriends. Women will run from men that are misogynists because they are not safe. You are not going to get a date if you have a bad fucking belief system about women. Women don't want you. And that's what's the problem. So what we have now is a reactionary movement of men who are reacting to feminism, the effects of feminism, women's equality and women's rights. They don't like it. They hate women. And because they have adopted these extreme beliefs, they are unattractive to women. Now, therefore, women are not having sex with them. What's the solution to that problem? It isn't forcing women to have sex. It's forcing men to unlearn their misogyny. So that women who want to have sex with them, they want to have relationships with them, but they want to have relationships that are loving, egalitarian relationships. And if men can't be those kind of partners, men will be alone. And that's why we have the loneliness epidemic.
In the United States, there is no cohort that has fallen further faster than young men.
People are constantly sharing this clip of Scott Galloway from The View where he's commenting on the plight of young men. And, I think his heart is in the right place. But this diatribe, this monologue, it reminds me of the opening days of the pandemic when the personal fortunes of the uber-rich were just collapsing at record pace. There was a whole commentary about how the pandemic was hurting the super rich more than the rest of us. Of course, the wealth that they were losing was entirely on paper and they got all of it back and more soon enough. Meanwhile, there were people who couldn't eat. But I also want to suggest that there's a little bit of a sleight of hand here because Galloway says young men, and yet the problems that he cites are problems that are affecting specific groups of young men. He cites phenomena that disproportionately affect racialized young men, black young men, BIPOC young men, or gay and queer identified young men. None of whom I think he is actually specifically talking about. I think he's actually talking about straight white young men.
Because of the advantage that I received as a white heterosexual male and my father received, we have a lack of empathy for them.
So there are two problems, at least, with what he said here. One is that he is overly concerned with what everybody else believes about young men because of the privilege and power of older men such as himself, without thinking about how that privilege and power affected the young men, their expectations, their sense of entitlement to white, male, and straight privilege. Galloway's generation and men older than him sold them a bill of goods that they have only been able to partially collect. And secondly, there's this whole empathy piece where he says, we don't have empathy. Who is we? And why must we empathize? If that we includes people who have been oppressed by white supremacy, male supremacy, heteronormativity, then who are we, myself included as straight white men, to ask, much less demand empathy, which if it's not obvious, we shouldn't and we can't. And concerningly, the answer, who is we, appears to be women.
And I hear from mothers and I hear from women. You know who wants more economically and emotionally viable men? Women.
I mentioned that women have been asking for better men, unless it's because you're accusing them of hypocrisy. But also, he's on The View, he's addressing a panel of women and an audience of mostly women, so. As much of the rest of this has been a mess, he almost sticks the landing at the end.
The ultimate expression of masculinity is for a man who is doing well. You don't have to be a baller just trying to live a virtuous life. Is to reach out and get involved in the life of a boy.
Masculinity is not the exclusive purview of men, and that ultimate expression of masculinity can be enacted. It can be performed just as easily by somebody who isn't a man. Women don't have to be, and they shouldn't be, resigned to a marginal role where they're just, providing empathy. Women can be role models for men and masculinity too.
If we want better men, we need to be better men.
Yeah, this part I can agree with.
It means that the quote-unquote pool of viable mates for women is going down every.
That is Professor Scott Galloway. You probably know who he is. I'm sure you've seen him many a time. He is a thought influencer. He is someone who is out and about quite a bit. It was a guest on Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO podcast. I love that podcast. Really, really enjoy what Stephen puts together. His guests, just tremendous. If you don't listen to it, give it a listen. But what I found repulsive about this particular episode, it was all about this crisis of young men. And hey, there are some things going on with young men that are absolutely not healthy, not good for our culture, for our society. What bothers me about this, though, is that we're only paying attention now when it's starting to impact white men. We never paid attention societally when it was black men who have been mistreated since the founding of our republic. They've been incarcerated, they've been maligned, all of those things. Never seemed to care, and now things are happening for white men or to white men, and we've decided that, oh my God, we're up in arms. I was also bothered by the fact that a lot of this was talking about how a lot of men can't find mates, younger men. And it was almost as if we women owe these men our fealty to become their mate, whether we date them, have sex with them, or heaven forbid, marry them. As we all know, a lot of younger women don't find marriage so attractive. And honestly, why the fuck would they? Okay? Everyone knows that the winner in marriage are men. Men win the marriage game. Women don't win it because we get to work full time these days. In a lot of instances, a lot of women make more than their husbands. And on top of that, then we get to come home and do all the labor at home, all the caregiving. Yeah, sign me up for that. No, a lot of women are saying no. One of the things I found really egregious was Scott says there aren't enough role models for young men. He says on the far right, people like Trump, a criminal, Putin, a murderer. On the far left, as far as I can tell, their vision of masculinity is to act more like a woman. No, Scott, we're not looking for men to act like women. We want them to act like caring partners, okay? Be a partner in my life, financially, emotionally, in all the ways. That's all we're looking for is equality. And I just find it hilarious that now that women have a piece of the economic pie, everybody's sad and depressed and you all want it back. Well, maybe we could start with parenting, okay? Maybe that new masculinity has to do with how you, both men and women, parent your children. Raise children, men, that women actually want to form a life with. That's where we can begin.
In the United States, there is no cohort that has fallen further faster than young men. 4 times more likely to kill themselves, 3 times more likely to be addicted, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated. And because of the advantage that I received as a white heterosexual male and my father received, we have a lack of empathy for them. 1 out of 3 men under the age of 30 hasn't had sex in the last year. And we have the deepest resourced, most talented people in the world trying to give young men a false impression that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen and with an algorithm. They're not going out, they're not getting a plan, they don't have the confidence to approach strangers for mentorship, for friendship, they're not getting jobs. And I hear from mothers and I hear from women. You know who wants more economically and emotionally viable men? Women.
Would
women.
Yeah.
And unless we have more empathy, empathy is not a zero-sum game. Civil rights did not hurt white people. Gay marriage did not hurt heteronormative marriage. We have to look at the statistics and understand that our young men are failing. They are struggling. 4 times the suicide rate. 4 times. There are things we can do. This is a call out to all men. The single point of failure when a young boy comes off the tracks is when he loses a male role model. The ultimate expression of masculinity is for a man who is doing well. You don't have to be a baller just trying to live a virtuous life, is to reach out and get involved in the life of a boy. If we want better men, we need to be better men.
Maturing a new species of asexual, asocial males that never get categorized or clinically diagnosed as addicts, but are just alone their whole lives and never develop these skills. One of the reasons I went on campus every day at UCLA, I wanted sex so badly and my hormones were raging so much that I was willing to take social risk.
For all our liberated sexual mores, young people are having less sex today than ever before.
Yeah.
Many young men will report that they feel like the social landscape out there when it comes to dating and having sex is so uncertain and such a landmine that they just end up staying home, watching pornography and masturbating. And for folks who are vulnerable to that as their drug of choice, it can evolve to the point where they literally cannot stop. It's like an endemic disease. It's not even like a rare disease. The antidote is to do the thing that's painful and difficult in the short term, because in the long term, it will make us feel better and it will make our lives better.
Democrats have not done a good job of convincing young men that bodily autonomy will affect them, specifically a lack thereof. If you want to be kind of cemented in poverty, have an unwanted child as a man. That's not going to help you economically. The case I've been making to young men when I did an endorsement of Vice President Harris is that I think if you polled a bunch of men under the age of 30 and said, would you rather have more opportunities for sex or less opportunities? I think the majority would say I'd rather have more opportunities for sex. What is going to happen to random opportunities for sex when if a woman gets pregnant, she might end up in an emergency room parking lot because the doctors won't treat her? Say she's having a failed pregnancy and she's in sepsis. There are now instances where emergency room doctors are worried about treating her for fear that they're going to be criminally prosecuted. What's going to happen if a young woman gets pregnant and has to carry the baby to term? Do you think she's more inclined to have random sex? I think what we needed to do and we failed to do on the progressive side is to say the bodily autonomy affects men almost as much as it does young.
Someone dies by suicide in the UK every 90 minutes. 76% of these are male. What is going wrong?
If you were to point to a single point of failure, it would be the
Scott Galloway,
entrepreneur, best-selling author,
professor,
one of the most desired minds when it comes to business and life. He is about the obsession of how to be better as individuals and as a society.
Society tells you, especially I think as a man, that your worth is highly correlated to your economic success. But for the first time, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents. Men under the age of 40 are 24% less wealthy. The average age of a first-time home buyer is 47 now. It's an online dating. You have to swipe right 1,000 times to get a single coffee. It's 1 in 7 men doesn't have a single friend. You're going to have men having relationships with machines. The most dangerous person in the world, a lonely, young, broke male. And we're producing millions of them. And that can lead to very ugly places for the economy and society.
What is the impact this is having on women?
Women have become better educated and they're making more money. It means that the quote-unquote pool of viable mates for women is going down every year.
And a lot of these men are finding role models online.
Yeah. This is a real issue. This is a group that's struggling. On the far right, people like Trump, a criminal, Putin, murderer. On the far left, as far as I can tell, their vision of masculinity is to act more like a woman. I don't think that's right either. We need a new vision for modern masculinity.
Do we need individual solutions or do we need societal solutions?
My solutions are pretty straightforward. And this is the one I'm working through and will definitely get me in the most trouble.
Talk to married couples that have been together longer than 30 years, 75% of them say one was much more interested in the other and was always the man who was much more interested. But over time, she saw that he was kind. She worked with him. He was good at what he did. So where do men demonstrate excellence now? And then a man goes online. Here, check out this stat. On Tinder, a man of average attractiveness has to swipe right 200 times to get one swipe back for one coffee. And then 4 of 5 of those coffees will ghost him. Her screen will come up again and she'll decide not to show up for a coffee. So a guy of average attractiveness on a dating app has to swipe right 1,000 times to get a coffee. So he feels rejected by women. He becomes much more prone to misogynistic content online, prone to conspiracy theory, less likely to believe in climate change. In some, he becomes a shitty citizen. So social media and online dating have been really bad for young men and women. I think online dating has been especially rough on men.
Yeah.